Welcome, foolish mortals. I am your host, Caitlin Doughty. Kindly settle in, please, and make room for everyone. There's no turning back now. Previously, on the wonderful world of death. Some Disney experts claim that Walt had an obsession with death. Sarah is coming over to join me, and she has talked me into Disney bounding.
We are childless women, and we're here to make the children cry.
Today we're in the park, and I feel like I'm doing an undercover death exposé. Most of the original or early Disneyland rides, like Snow White's Scary Adventures, which I had never heard of but is still there, and Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, which they send you to hell at the end of, were based on carnival attractions. Carnival attractions and rides had deathy themes.
That one was really fun. That was the most fun so far. Anytime I could go to hell, it's happy.
This type of ride started appearing in the 19th century, called dark rides, or ghost trains. Passengers would board a type of vehicle that ran along a track, traveling through the darkness, hence the name dark ride. Along the way, riders would experience various lighted scenes with sounds, music, and special effects, usually with a storyline. The ghost train had a similar vibe. A group of train passengers find themselves stranded in an isolated train station. A station agent, before locking up for the night, warns them about a ghost train that haunts the railway. Its passengers are the victims of a tragic railway accident, and those who dare look upon the ghost train will die. Spoiler, the stranded passengers ignore the agent's warning, and spookiness ensues. You can see this exact concept leveled up even further at Disneyland, with rides like Pirates of the Caribbean and, of course, the Haunted Mansion. Walt Disney had always planned for a haunted house at Disneyland, but it would be 14 years before it actually materialized. In the early years of the ride's development, the storyline centered on a murder-suicide, a sea captain who murdered his wife and then took his own life in the house. That concept was later scrapped, but you can still spot a ship's weather vane on top of the mansion, a nod to this original idea. Original designs for the exterior of the house had it looking more classic haunted house, old, dilapidated, abandoned, but Walt didn't think it would suit the pristine fantasy world of Disneyland.
I'll come right over here and I'll show you where you're going to meet the ghosts. This is a little scale model now of the Disneyland area. You've seen this many times, but we haven't got the ghosts in there yet. But we're out collecting the ghosts. We're going to bring ghosts from all over the world.
Development on the attraction came to a halt in 1966 when Walt died. More on that to come. The ride's creative team was in disagreement about the overall theme. Was it spooky or humorous? Which is why the ride today is both. With years of build-up, Disney fans were given ample time to cultivate urban legends about the ride, including the death of a journalist because what he had seen in a preview of the attraction was so terrifying, he had a heart attack right then and there.
I think we're stuck on the Haunted Mansion ride. We've been here for like 5 minutes and we're backwards, upside down, and Jack Skeleton keeps yelling at us and being like, "Merry Christmas, it's all fine." According to Sarah, at this point in the ride, when you turn and you flip and you go down backwards, it's supposed to be the moment of your death. So right now we are stuck in a profoundly liminal space between life and death. And I'm going to use this moment to reflect. Oh, I can't go backwards. We made it out. Thank God. It was terrifying. It wasn't actually terrifying, just the being in the broken down ride and being claustrophobic and not knowing how long we were going to be there. That was a little scarier than the ride itself.
The Haunted Mansion finally opened in 1969 and has remained one of Disney's most popular attractions. Two examples of Walt's lasting death obsession can be found just outside the Haunted Mansion. The first one is a pet cemetery. The other is a favorite of Disneyland's cast members, a truly strange corporate term used to describe Disneyland employees. The white hearse parked outside the mansion was once an actual horse-drawn hearse used in funerals. Now, there's a weird legend attached to the hearse, that it was the hearse that carried Mormon leader Brigham Young to his final resting place in 1877. Isn't that true? There's also a claim that there's a stain that's actual bodily fluids from a corpse that was once carried in it. How interesting would it be if they went to such great lengths for a completely spotless reputation, and then there's just a big corpse fluid stain on one of their most popular attractions?
So this is all that remains of the best Disneyland attraction that never was. The secret catacombs.
That's right. At one point, there was a plan for a graveyard and crypt in Disneyland by the 1764 archway. It would lead into underground catacombs inspired by the famous Paris catacombs. The plan was motivated by an idea to connect the Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Tom Sawyer Island, a tangible manifestation of how everything in the Disney universe is connected by both Walt and the Specter of Death. The concept designer for the project, Eddie Soto, said it would feature a real-life pirate, Jean Lafitte, and be decorated with the bones of Lafitte's victims. Sadly, the 1764 crypt archway is all that remains of the abandoned project.
Now we're at the next best thing.
This ride broke when I was here with my dad, so we'll see how it goes. If there's no real skull, wait a minute.
Flip over the way.
Here we go. The dead tell tales. Do they tell no tales? Or they tell
They
tales?
tell no tales.
Tell no
They do.
tales.
It says they tell no tales, but they do.
This is grammatically confusing.
Dead men tell no tales.
Combining the new technology of audio animatronics and a dark boat ride, Imagineers were able to immerse visitors in a world of pirate adventure that included secret caverns, ships firing cannons, a town on fire, and general pirate shenanigans. But I'm primarily interested in the real skeletons I have been told to expect on this ride. Bit of a busman's holiday to go looking for skeletons in my leisure time, but there you go. According to not only Disneyland cast members, but Imagineers like Jason Surrell, this bit of Disney folklore is true. Because the prop skeletons available in 1969 looked too unconvincing, they reached out to UCLA's Medical Center Anatomy Department, who hooked them up with some real skeletons and human skulls to be placed around the various sets on the ride. UCLA doesn't have the greatest track record with its cadavers. There was that whole scandal in the early 2000s concerning the medical school's body donation program selling body parts to the highest bidder. Though, for the record, under a new director who I know, UCLA's current body donation program is exemplary. They're not giving any body parts to Disneyland. Tell you that. In later years, the ride's bones were removed and replaced with fake ones, and allegedly the original skeletons were identified and returned for proper burial. But some Disney fans speculate there may be as many as 3 left on the ride somewhere, including this skull that's built into this headboard. So what is the future of death at Disneyland? One of Disney's most recent successes is Coco, a film inspired by Mexico's Day of the Dead. A film which, in keeping with Walt's legacy, puts death front and center. The movie itself was very well received, but the corporate Disney tomfoolery surrounding it was not.
I guess I have a lot of conflicting feelings about it, as with all things that are Disney. It's wonderful to have a piece of our Mexican culture celebrated and recognized in mainstream culture, but at the same time, there's a big dissonance there. The beauty and the rituals of Dia de Muertos are very much celebrated and commercialized here, but the people aren't.
Well, how do you feel about, is this celebration or appropriation?
It's Disney, it's appropriation. They've been very sneaky before.
What Sarah's talking about here is that in 2013, Disney tried to trademark Dia de los Muertos and Day of the Dead as phrases. Filings at the US Patent and Trademark Office revealed Disney's plans to market hundreds of Day of the Dead themed items, everything from toys to cosmetics, books, photographs, and frozen foods. After after a huge outcry from the Latino community, Disney withdrew the filings.
Our dead are not for sale.
Yeah, I think that we forget it's not just Mexican culture you're celebrating here, it's like a specific Mexican death and funerary culture.
And even into Central and South America as well.
It can be challenging separating facts from fantasy and history from reality in Walt's Magic Kingdom, especially when it comes to death. In fact, the most widely believed Disney myth is about Walt's own death. You've likely heard, or maybe even believe, that upon his death in 1966, Walt Disney's corpse was cryogenically frozen and is currently being kept in Sleeping Beauty's castle, awaiting technological advancements that would allow him to be reanimated. The truth is much less exciting. Los Angeles Magazine tracked down the first mention of Walt being cryogenically preserved to a 1972 LA Times interview with, surprise, surprise, Bob Nelson, the former president of the Cryonics Society of California. To quote Bob, "Walt Disney wanted to be frozen. Lots of people think he was, and that the body's in cold storage in his basement. The truth is, Walt missed out. He never specified in his writing, and when he died, the family didn't go for it. They had him cremated. I personally have seen his ashes. They're in Forest Lawn. 2 weeks later, we froze the first man. If Disney had been the first, it would have made headlines around the world and been a real shot in the arm for cryonics. But that's the way it goes." This story likely spread via word of mouth, quite inaccurately, like a game of morbid telephone. Jeff. What's more, even the idea that Walt wanted to be frozen may not even be true. It's more likely that Disney Studios was calling as research for a project, the strange utopian city Walt was planning called Epcot, the experimental prototype city/community of tomorrow. In reality, Walt Disney was cremated and is interred at Forest Lawn Cemetery, ironically a place known as the Disneyland of Death, for the cemetery's reputation as a meticulously fabricated, almost cheerful necropolis, devoid of any actual death. In short, a perfect place for Uncle Walt. There were even more connections between the cemetery and Disney. Prior to the opening of Disneyland, Forest Lawn was the most popular tourist attraction in Southern California, and Forest Lawn's creator, Hubert Eaton, and Walt Disney were good friends. When Eaton died, Walt was an honorary pallbearer at his funeral. Honorary only because Walt wasn't physically there because, as you may remember from our last video, Walt didn't do funerals. Another well-known Disneyland legend centers on claims that the park is a popular destination for scattering cremated remains. That one is true. Join us next time as we move from the fantasy of death to the hard realities of death at Disneyland. If you like this video, please click the little like button and it will tell you when the next video is up. I have to beg you to do this because I too am a corporate pro and my dignity means nothing.
Disney's head.
This video was made with generous donations from death enthusiasts just like you. See, I can take my mini ears off, but I think they look better. Hi there. Was once an actual horse-drawn hearse used... Ugh. I don't think Disney would leave that there. Ooh. Spuckinescences. Oh my god, it's Spuckinescences! Spuckinescences. They're always sacking towns and things. I too am always sacking town. Blowing snot and snacking towns. Snacking towns, yum. That's what Disney is, one big snack town. Walt missed out. He never specified, but the corporate Disney tomfoolery surrounding it was not. Tomfoolery cuts.
Come to the unfortunate realization that I just sort of fit in. Like, you can't tell that I'm doing this for a purpose. I just look like this is what I do every day. It's very dark.